G'day everybody, Uncle Joey Jojo here. Today we are interviewing Dr. Tony Page. We've flown up from Melbourne up to sunny old Cairns, Queensland, and we are going to talk through with Tony Page about the different trees that we grow in Australia and the reason that we grow those trees. So, welcome Tony.
How are you, Jay?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Welcome.
Oh, thank you very much. So this is where you work?
Yeah,
These are all your seedlings?
Yeah, this is our nursery here in sunny North Queensland.
What kind of trees are they?
These are sandalwood trees, and so we've been trying to grow these trees here in North Queensland, as I said, for a few years, and we're in the process of selecting the trees that are adapted to this area and grow fast and give us a good product.
So what do we use the sandalwood for?
Sandalwood is a tree that's used for incense mainly, the perfume. It produces an oil-rich heartwood, fragrant heartwood. A lot of people in India, a lot of people in the Middle East, a lot of people in China use it for traditional purposes, religious purposes, those sort of things. They burn it, they burn the wood, they use it for offerings, and also the oil. They extract the oil from the heartwood and they distill that, they get that oil out, and they use that in perfumes. Yeah, a lot of perfumes have sandalwood oil in it.
Didn't you actually find a species of sandalwood yourself that had never been discovered before?
Not exactly, but yeah, in a way what we did, I work with James Cook University, and we had been doing some work in Vanuatu with sandalwood, and so what we were trying to do was to find the sandalwood that growing in the wild with the best qualities. And so like any product, you have your tomatoes or apples, you have good quality apples and you have poor quality apples. What we were trying to do with sandalwood is find the trees that produced a good quality oil. And so what we did is we basically ran around the country sampling trees in the wild.
Yeah, right.
And then we took that back to the lab, tested the quality, and then we went back out to find those trees that produce a good quality, and then we collect cuttings and seed from those trees, and we use those trees to establish new plantings. Will then give you a good quality product when you grow it.
Yeah, right.
So for me, if you're growing a tree, you want to produce a product that people are going to want. Yeah. So you're better off growing a high quality product rather than a low quality product. So that was sort of the whole objective. And so in terms of the species, we found a new species. We didn't find a new species, but what we found was we found a lot of trees that had much higher oil quality than we ever expected. So that was the sort of upshot of the research.
Right. Dr. Tony Page, you go overseas quite a lot to research different trees and communities.
So the research that we do is funded by the federal government, the Australian federal government, and it's essentially to try and give options for smallholder farmers in the Pacific and Southeast Asia. These farmers are very poor, they don't have a lot of options for generating cash.
Yeah, right.
And so forestry is one way for them to plant trees as sort of as a method for saving. Right. And planting very high valuable trees that they can actually sell is what we're trying to do. And so planting trees that are good quality. So that's really the main aim, and we do that by what we call domestication. Domestication is a process where you're basically trying to find the best possible forms to plant. Right. There's a number of crops or a number of trees that we're focusing on. One is the sandalwood, as you can see here. Yeah. Another one is teak. Teak produces a very valuable hardwood. It's one of the most valuable hardwoods in the world.
We use it a lot for furniture, manufacture.
Furniture making, joinery, but furniture making, shipbuilding. It's a very stable timber. Doesn't swell a lot when it gets wet. It's rot resistant. The other thing about teak, which is of interest to the smallholders or the growers in Southeast Asia or the Pacific, is that it's a very easy tree to grow. Oh, right. Rapid growth, can capture the site. When I say capture the site, it can grow very quickly. That means you don't have to weed it much anymore. So if a tree grows slowly, you've got to weed the plot. You've got to do a lot of work before it actually what we call captures the site. So it owns the site. Teak grows very quickly. It's easy to grow, and it has a market. Once they're ready to sell, it's probably 15 to 20 years. And then they'll sell it. 15 to 20 years. Yeah.
And has the sap had time to absorb into the grain and stuff?
The quality of plantation wood is never going to be as good as the quality of timber that comes out of the bush. Yeah, okay. Because if you're harvesting a tree at 15 to 20 years,
yeah.
it's not had the time to develop that grain
Maturity.
and the heartwood that you would get in a wild-grown tree.
Yeah, right.
So it's up to the grower. If the grower wants to hold it for 40, 50 years, good on them.
Yeah, right.
But most growers are not going to do that. They're
Yeah,
going to want to try and get it, you know, in 15 to 20 years. You know, probably more likely 20 years. But again, you still got a market for it, and that's probably the way.
So pine, because we in Australia, we have pine, we have eucalyptus. They're the two main ones that we use for building.
Yeah.
Teak is for furniture.
Yeah.
Do you take pine and eucalyptus and take them overseas, or is it solely an Australian timber that we use for building?
No, well, the Australian government has funded a lot of research. I've not been involved in it, for getting out a lot of eucalypts, acacias mainly, the two main species, wattles.
Acacias are wattles, sorry.
Yeah, acacias
okay.
are wattles.
Yep, yep.
So those are the two main species that Australia helps. You know, places like China, places like Vietnam, places like Indonesia, not so much PNG, but they have an interest in planting eucalypts and acacia because there's such quick growing trees. There's a whole diversity of that you can draw upon.
Yeah, right.
So if you find an environment, say in Vietnam, you'll be able to find an equivalent environment in Australia where you could select a species of eucalypts that would be adapted to growing in Vietnam.
Yeah, right.
And so in the eucalypts in Vietnam, particularly in China, provide smallholder farmers already. This research goes back 20, 30 years already. Already provides timber for people.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
so you've already
local construction, these sorts of things, export,
right.
paper making, timber on the international market.
But are they seen? Is eucalypt seen as a nuisance timber overseas?
There's always two sides to that camp where you've got people that say it shouldn't be grown here because it's not native, but the eucalypts have an advantage over many other tree species in that they're very adaptable. They can grow in very poor soils and they're actually very quick growing. Yeah, right. And so some people say, well, you should be finding a locally adapted species for that, for that location. Yeah. But other people, particularly the growers, say, well, we really like eucalypts because they're very easy to grow. I can't really grow anything. There's nothing locally that will grow and is well adapted to this site as these trees. So yeah, there are positives and negatives. Yeah, right. I always see it from the positive side. The eucalypts are adapted to growing in those environments. So and it provides an income for people that have very little other options. So for me, I always sort of look on the positive sides of introducing species. Yeah, there's a species for every type of environment in Australia.
So
from
hence why they use
alpine to tropical to desert to subtropical. Yeah, so that's why it's adaptable. You can find any species for any application. Right. The only way for a new species that's been brought into domestication or has been brought into plantations is to start testing it by what sort of sites does it grow in the wild, and then replicating those sorts of sites or finding similar sites that you would then plant, as a plantation. Okay. So those trees that are grown, one of the selection criteria for domestication is, for pine or eucalypts or any other tree or any other crop, is to find those that are adaptable to a wide range of sites. Okay. And that's why eucalypts and pines are so, that's why you see them commonly planted, because they're so well adapted to a range of different sites. Okay. So you can put it on a poorer site or a good site and they'll still grow. The productivity is still there, where a lot of other tree species might not be as adaptable, and that's why you don't see them as much in plantations, because they're harder to grow. So
they're not so when you were saying before about timber being domesticated or domesticating trees, you're saying to me that, correct me if I'm wrong, that if a tree is easy to grow in an environment, it becomes easily domesticated. If it doesn't grow easily in an environment, then we don't domesticate it?
Yeah, because people want to have the shortest possible route to domestication or to plantations, and you're better off working with something that's easy to grow and tough, something like pine, eucalypts, teak, these sorts of trees that are much easier to work with, than try and bring a tree that's difficult to work with, because trees are naturally a long-term crop, so getting domestication is a long-term prospect. You're talking decades rather than 5 or 10 years. Yeah, right. So if you're working with a tree that is difficult to grow, it's going to take a lot longer to get to that point.
So kind of like a coconut tree. The timber's really dense, it's hard, but it takes a long time to grow.
Yeah.
But they're a good hardy timber.
Yeah, a lot of those, the lumber that they would use, coconut in the Pacific, is the older copra plantations. Copra is the name of the crop that coconut comes off.
Oh, right.
And so a lot of those plantations in the Pacific are now getting in decline.
Yeah, right.
And because the price of copra is very low, they're now harvesting their old plantations that were established by the colonial.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, amazing timber. It's beautiful timber.
You were telling me there's different sections of a tree. So there's heartwood.
Yeah, so there is a heartwood and you have sapwood, and heartwood is where you get the best, most durable timber from, because there are protective resins and oils deposited in the heartwood.
Right.
And so I think that's what defines what the heartwood is. It's the dead part of the tree rather than the living part of the tree. So for teak, for example, it has a heartwood and it has a sapwood. The heartwood is quite a dark colour, rich red colour, or brown, or depending on what form of teak. And then on the outside you have the sapwood, which is really where all the the water and the nutrients are going up and down the tree. And
that's why it's so soft.
It's much softer.
Right.
And so when let's say you put a teak round in the ground, well, what will happen is that the sapwood will rot off quite quickly, but the heartwood will remain. It's much more durable because of all the protective oils and resins within the heartwood.
Yeah, right.
And so for a lot of hardwoods, the development of the heartwood is important. So some trees will develop heartwood quicker, and some trees will grow heartwood a lot slower. Okay. And even within a species, some trees will develop heartwood quicker, and some trees develop slower. And so our job is to find the trees that grow it quicker.
Okay. And that we can use.
That we can when we harvest it at 20 years, there's a lot of heartwood in there.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Dr. Tony Page, I really appreciate it. Thanks for having us here. Beautiful piece of land that you got. Great area to be living.
Yeah. You're welcome anytime. Anytime we're going to come back, come over.
Thanks.
We'll share a beer.
All right. This is me signing off. Till next time, I hope you've learned something today, and I'll catch you on the building site.